Mass Media.
Is like something along the lines of that you guys are bringing together some of the top kind of leaders in the region to tell their stories and to share with the world that the border is much more than maybe what the media says it is. And that there's a lot of expertise on both sides of the border. More than considering myself a border master, to answer your question, I think Codet is a border master. I think Codet is something that I'm very lucky to be a part of, and I hope that we can just impact that many more lives over the next 5 to 10 years.
The idea of doing this podcast is that not everybody has to live at the border to be a border master.
LASIK Media presents Border Masters, the podcast where the U.S.-Mexico border takes center stage.
Gustavo is from Nogales. He has amazing credentials. So he's super knowledgeable of everything border, but we come from very different borders.
Monique is very good on the emotional intelligence. It's the personality that she has that allows people just to feel relaxed. It's part of letting the world know why has it been so successful to have that border and what has inspired them about the border.
Now here are your hosts, Gustavo and Monique.
Welcome to Border Masters, the podcast where border leaders share stories of innovation, collaboration, and impact. I'm Gustavo de la Fuente, your co-host, and alongside me is my co-host, Monique Casellas. Today, we're excited to have Daniel Chayet, CEO of Codet Vision Institute in Tijuana. And I've got to say, this company for nearly 40 years has transformed the lives on both sides of the border, delivering world-class eye care, pioneering breakthroughs that have made a global impact. To put it in perspective, this company, Codet, has performed over 85,000 surgeries, all at a fraction of the cost compared to the U.S., offering savings of between 65 to 70%. Their expertise spans everything from cataracts and refractive surgery to pediatric ophthalmology and glaucoma care. More than just an eye care leader, Codet is a prime example of Tijuana's booming medical tourism industry. And as patients increasingly seek high-quality, affordable care outside the U.S., Codet has been at the forefront of delivering exceptional outcomes paired with convenience and compassionate service. And behind much of this groundbreaking work is Dr. Arturo Chayet, Daniel's father, and a true visionary in the field. He's the pioneer who performed the very first LASIK procedure in the Western United States and in all of Mexico, and invented all laser LASIK. I met Daniel almost 8 years ago when I was with the Smart Border Coalition, highlighting health industry success stories across the border, and I toured Codet's clinic and have even benefited personally with glasses and surgery there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gustavo. We're super excited to have you, Daniel. Thank you so much. And I haven't met you until today. However, I'm no stranger to Codet either. I got LASIK from your dad as well, like 13 years ago. And funny story, actually, when I went to my eye doctor here in San Diego, and I told him, I need, like, it's fading right now that I'm old. and I was like, I had LASIK in Tijuana. He's like, oh, did you do it with Dr. Chayet? I'm like, oh, yes. Do you know him? He's like, of course. He's an institution. And I was very surprised and impressed. I shouldn't be, but I think that speaks volumes of the reputation and trust that Codet has earned on both sides of the border. So it's great what you guys have done.
Daniel, welcome to Border Masters. We're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you for that incredible introduction, Gustavo. It couldn't have been said better than that. Very succinct and also just very poignant. So I appreciate it. And Monique, your story, your personal story is very inspiring just to hear how people in their everyday lives come across the brand and the Institute. And it's just motivates us to keep going and to keep trying to impact lives over the.
Well, thank you, Daniel. Tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to Tijuana to lead Codet after studying at the University of Michigan and UCLA. I mean, what inspired you to join the family legacy?
It's a great question. So, you know, as the child of a successful physician, you always get asked the question, hey, didn't you want to become a doctor? And the truth is, I was always very drawn to numbers. And also, I was also a very big fan of the social sciences as well and humanities. So it was like a combination of right, left, and left brain with numbers and also stories. But, in terms of the hard sciences, besides physics, which is a little bit more mathematical, biology and chemistry weren't really, I guess, my favorite subjects. And so I explored it a little bit early on in undergrad, but ultimately I realized, I'm going to really focus on something that has to do more with both the qualitative and quantitative aspects of life. And obviously medicine does have some of that, but and I actually do really enjoy that part of what I do today, the medical side of things in terms of understanding, like, let's say, clinical research and the quantitative side of things there. But really, I guess my passion is both working with people, growing an enterprise, and also understanding, I guess, the number side of things. So in terms of my background academically, in undergrad, I studied psychology, and in grad school, in my MBA, I focused on finance. And then in terms of the family business, how I ended up there, it's interesting. When I finished at the University of Michigan, I was really just eager to get out, get experience, and looking for jobs, and all of a sudden my dad said, "Hey, I've had this idea now for about a year. I want to grow, but in a way where we grow through satellite facilities, not anymore just directly in Tijuana." He had already tried other models where he had, with a partner, different facilities around Mexico, and that was an interesting model. It had its both success components and also its challenges. But now we wanted it to kind of really grow with a feeder kind of model where leads would be generated in a physical retail model kind of situation, and then they would be referred over to Codet or to another facility if that made sense. So he started off doing it in Rosarito. Actually, I wasn't involved in that one in that first iteration. And the model was an optical shop where there's also like an on-site physician, whether it's ophthalmologist or an optometrist. The patient comes in, asks, I need to get my a new prescription for my glasses or something like that. And all of a sudden, we start to really understand if they might be interested in LASIK. And so that was a way to capture patients. So we started that in Rosarito. But then when I came in, specifically when I graduated from undergrad, we said, you know what, let's do something in South San Diego. Let's do something in Chula Vista, where East Lake was growing a lot. And so that was really how I got into ophthalmology. I learned a lot doing that project. Unfortunately, we kind of also crossed paths with the Great Recession in 2008. And so it wasn't very friendly to like a new model, where also like there's some certain challenges also involving being able to accept insurance and things like that. So unfortunately, in the end, it was much more of a success in terms of learning. It wasn't as much of an actual success, but that catapulted me into going to work for two different medical device companies in the space of ophthalmology, and also my MBA. So it was really a great foundational experience. And then ultimately, when I was at Abbott working in their global marketing department, we were invited to a summit in Chicago. And it's the annual summit that they do for their up and coming managers. I was part of something called the Management Development Program. And so they invited all the different business unit leaders in Abbott across, all their different businesses, diabetes.
This is Abbott Labs, right?
Abbott Labs, yeah. So diabetes care,
Sure.
Cardiology, ophthalmology, even animal care, stuff like that. And one of the leaders was saying, we want to turn you into us. We see you becoming us. And that makes complete sense. They're developing talent. And that night I went to sleep and I said, even though this is a great program and I really do love the kind of work I'm doing and I'm really learning a lot, ultimately I just didn't see myself, following that path. And so I took a long hard look in the mirror and I said, I really want to be entrepreneurial, but I don't want to have another experience like the one I had It was now 5 or 6 years before that, which was starting the business and it not working out. But I want to work somewhere where I can grow something, where I can really have an impact, where I can roll up my sleeves. And so the perfect mix of that was joining Codet in Tijuana. And that was in 2015. And I never looked back. It's been 10 years now. And I'm happy to say that the business is thriving more than ever. And we've grown about 3 times over X, both in terms of financial success and both in terms of the size of our company, in terms of the number of employees and many other metrics. So it's been a great run so far.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you, Daniel. And can we go back to 1986
Of course.
when your dad, being this successful eye doctor, founded Codet? First of all, what does Codet mean? I don't even know what that means. And I think it has changed from how does it change from being just like an eye doctor or private practice or a clinic to a whole vision institute? So can you walk us through that history path?
Absolutely. So Codet stands for Centro Oftalmológico de Tijuana. It's an acronym. So in English, that would translate to Ophthalmology Center in Tijuana. But it's interesting. Codet sounds a lot like Chayet. And I think that, a lot of physicians, if you look around to a lot of our peers, for example, in Southern California, in LA, San Diego, a lot of those folks will name their institute after themselves, which is great. But I think my dad always saw institutionalization where everybody knows it's connected to him. For example, everybody knows Apple is Steve Jobs and Steve Jobs is Apple. But ultimately, Apple has lived on after Steve Jobs left us. And I think my dad saw something very similar, but he wanted it to sound a little bit like, he wanted people to be able to relate to it. So, that was an interesting way that the name came about. And in terms of the history, my grandfather's, he's no longer with us either, but he was an ophthalmologist. And so my dad had always grown up super inspired. In some ways, he had a little bit of an advantage because my grandfather wasn't only a pioneer in cataract surgery, but he was also a pioneer in contact lenses. So most ophthalmologists didn't understand contact lenses. And so my dad understanding contact lenses as well as he did, that's really the genesis of refractive surgery. Because the procedure is being performed on the cornea, and you really have to understand the refractive components of both eyeglasses and contact lenses, and the way that light is bended and refracted, and all that stuff. And so my dad had a great, I guess you could say, start there. He did his medical school and residency in Mexico City, and then he was invited by the very prestigious Dr. Stuart Brown. He was leading the cornea department at UCSD in the late 80s, to do his fellowship there with him. And it was a once in a lifetime opportunity for my dad. So he and my mom was very excited to join him. And also, side note, in Mexico City, where they were living at the time, things weren't always the smoothest over there in terms of, as you guys can imagine. And that's a lot of the reason why a lot of us are now living in the U.S. instead of Mexico. But they looked for greener pastures in the U.S. So my dad did his fellowship in San Diego, and at the time, him and my grandfather had decided to establish a little office in Tijuana. And so my dad in the afternoons would go and see patients. And before he knew it, my mom said, "You know what? I love it here." My dad said, "I see a lot of opportunity in Tijuana to capture medical tourism patients, to do clinical trials with the medical device community in Orange County." And so that was the genesis of Codet. I'd love to answer some of your questions, Monique, in terms of how it became an institute, but I'll let you guys kind of do some follow-ups there.
Thank you, Daniel.
No, that was a brilliant move from your dad to establish the Codet name initially, and then to partner up with some of these Orange County companies. We'll talk about that a little later, because that's actually critical to the success of Codet. But Daniel, so medical tourism is often talked about broadly, right? We always talk about medical tourism this, medical tourism that, but we don't really get into the specifics. Tijuana seems to stand out as a leading destination for U.S. patients seeking affordable top-tier care. Can you talk about how medical tourism fits into your model?
Absolutely.
What makes Tijuana uniquely positioned as a medical tourism hub,
Absolutely.
especially for eye care?
Absolutely. So I think there's two different kinds of medical tourism. There's the more local variety where it's like you get folks coming down either from San Diego or from LA, and it's pretty local, it's pretty quick. And then there's the kind where people fly in from different parts of the world for major procedures. And Tijuana is primed to dominate in both. So, I mean, Southern California is, in terms of population, it's, what is it, 15 million, probably closer to 20 million people in the world. I mean, if people talk about how California alone is the sixth top economy in the world, or fourth or fifth, whatever it might be, Southern California might be, top 10 or top 12, right? If you just divide California in half. And not only that, but the Latino community in Southern California is very strong, is thriving. And in terms of actual, economic buying power, they're also a very strong submarket. So I think that Tijuana is perfectly situated to both take advantage of the Latino population, Southern California, also even, let's say, Vegas, Arizona. It's in driving distance. It's about a 3 to 4, at most 5-hour drive from different parts, even the southern part of the Central California, let's say Bakersfield, for example, or even Fresno. So it's a huge market in terms of that community. And as we know, that community, there's a mixture of things. Some of those folks do have health insurance, some of them don't. But then, of course, Tijuana is very strong in elective procedures. So even if insurance, oftentimes isn't a part of the conversation. Like, let's say weight loss surgery, bariatric surgery. Well, it's really not covered by insurance. Let's say fertility treatments or even dental implants, pretty much not covered by insurance. So the main reason why people travel to Tijuana or anywhere is really for savings. But obviously, we know that there has to be a certain level of quality of care. I'm sure, like, for example, Thailand is a great hub for medical tourism, or Turkey, obviously. But, our colleagues in Tijuana all have some sort of a relationship with the U.S., whether some of them were trained in the U.S. or whether they work all the time with suppliers from the U.S. So we're very much a U.S.-oriented medical tourism hub. We're not just, high quality and lower cost and great customer service, which that's what Mexico is known for. You can go to the best hotels in the world in Mexico, the best restaurants in Mexico. We have that exact warm customer service in Tijuana and in Mexico, but it's really almost like a U.S. orientation, I would say, that makes Tijuana a very important hub for medical tourism. And of course, San Diego is a major city. You can't compare, and I don't want to poorly of other hubs, but like, just to take an example, you have El Paso and Juarez. Well, El Paso is a top, I don't know, 40 city or 30 city in the U.S., but it's not a top 10 city the way San Diego is. And then Tijuana is a top 5, 6 city in Mexico. So you have this unique, like, border environment that it's almost impossible to replicate in the world. And the final thing is CBX, as everybody knows, the cross-border express, and shout out to my buddy Jorge over there who runs it. He's done an incredible job. Oh, it's one of 2 private border crossings in the world. The other one's in France-Switzerland border. So very unique environment that we live in, and perfect for medical tourism.
I love that you say that, Daniel, because that's why Border Master was born, because we know how unique we are. So thank you for saying that.
And we have to talk about it, because unfortunately, sometimes other stories are told, and we need to tell the beautiful ones. So
that's why we're here. And thank you for supporting us in that regards. So Codet, it has a legacy of innovation, and it's incredible. And I'm curious to know, so you were talking about the history, the clinic that your father and grandfather opened in Tijuana, and you were going to tell us about how it became an institute. So let's do that.
Sure.
But also, when was that moment that your dad, Dr. Arturo Chayet, did that, like, international breakthrough?
Yeah. Great.
What we said in the beginning was the LASIK, right? Surgery. Tell us a little bit about that and how he just opened his shell to be known everywhere. And also the all laser LASIK as well, that I know is very unique to Codet.
Absolutely. So 1994 was a pivotal year in Codet. It's I guess 86 was important, and then in some ways 2000, and there's other milestones, but I'd say the most important milestone, the most important pivotal year was 1994, because in that year, three or four things happened. The first one was that, like, as you mentioned, My dad was the second person to perform LASIK in all of North America. And as you said, the first person in Western North America, so west of the Mississippi, and the first person in Mexico. So the first person in North America was a physician out of Ontario, Canada. And very similarly, he's in Windsor, Ontario, which is right near the Detroit border, the Detroit, Michigan to Ontario border, US and Canada.
Vamos a una pequeña pausa. Estás escuchando Border Masters. Regresamos en un momento.
Content creators ready to take your podcast from something you just thinking about doing to making it a production reality? Look no further than Olas Media San Diego's premier podcast network, located in the heart of Mission Valley.
At Olas Media, we've got everything you need to produce high-quality podcasts. With professional producers, state-of-the-art facilities, and talented graphic and sound designers, we'll bring your vision to life.
Join our lineup of dynamic shows like Dear San Diego, where we dive into the city's heartbeat. Beyond the Doors, your go-to for real estate and housing insights. Cannabis Enlightened, exploring the evolving cannabis industry.
Plus, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes brings a fresh, fun take on movies. Border Masters shines a light on the complexities of the U.S.-Mexico border. No matter the topic, Olas is your creative home. Even our clients say so.
Ready to bring your podcast to life? Let Olas Media be your partner in production. Visit olasmedia.com and get started today.
Let us amplify your brand.
Border Masters está de regreso. Volvamos con Gustavo y Monique.
And so it was making a lot of sense again to have pioneers near the borders. You had pioneers in Ontario, you had pioneers in Vancouver, British Columbia, and so my dad was the first person in Mexico and the second person in North America to perform LASIK, and that was huge. It really positioned the clinic around the world. He established a great relationship with at the time a powerhouse in manufacturing lasers, a Japanese company, Nidec. So like imagine how these Japanese companies were doing so well in the late 80s, like Sony, for example, or of course Toyota. Well, Nidec was just another example of that Japanese innovation. So that was a very important part of the story as well. They supported him so much, and so in that year he was the second person to do LASIK in North America. He started the fellowship program at Codet. So because he was starting to develop so much prestige, he said, I want to train physicians from other parts of Mexico. That's when he really started to ramp up his clinical trials department. That's when the Orange County startups and medical device companies were talking to him before that. But really in the mid-90s, 94, was when they started coming to him with interesting clinical trials, with interesting research opportunities. And then, interestingly enough, that's when his practice started growing a little bit. And so even, for example, he would start getting all sorts of patients. He would get patients who were very well off and could afford all of his fees. But then he would even get patients that were really, truly underprivileged. And so that's where the idea of potentially starting a foundation one day also kind of was born. So 1994 was very pivotal. And then 1995, with one of the companies he had been working with to do clinical trials, they came to him and said, Arturo, we want to try this new laser. So the excimer laser already existed. He was already doing LASIK with excimer laser. They said, I want to try this picosecond laser to do a similar procedure for LASIK. And he looked at it and said, guys, this is not going to work for LASIK, but it's going to work to create the flap. It's going to work to create the first part of the procedure. Because LASIK requires two procedures. It requires creating a flap and lifting it, and then the actual laser itself ablating the cornea and creating a change in the curvature in order to provide that refractive correction. So all of a sudden, he invented all laser LASIK, and eventually it became a femtosecond laser, not a picosecond laser. But he said these types of lasers, the femtosecond laser, is not going to work well for the ablation, but it's going to work very well for the flap. And so in 2000, they came back with a perfected femtosecond laser, and he became the first person to perform all laser LASIK as well in 2000, after he had already come up with the idea a couple of years before that. And then, a couple of other important milestones, like in 1997, he developed something called bitoric LASIK, which is a very big contribution to the field at the time. And all of that culminated in 1999. He received the Lanz Lecture Award, which is kind of like a little bit like, the Nobel Prize for a certain field. Well, it was the most prestigious award at the time in ophthalmology, and so all of that culminated in Codet now is growing a lot as well. And then my dad was able to take a big financial risk, buy a piece of land in Zona Rio. So he used to be where Simsa is today, right on the border. That building was called El Edificio Alan Lloyd at the time. But we wanted to grow. We wanted to have all the other subspecialties. We want to have the foundation, clinical trials, optical shop, state-of-the-art surgery facilities. So in 2000, they inaugurated a 25,000 square foot facility. My mom and my dad, my mom was a very important part of that project as well. By the way, I should say my mom joined my dad in the mid 90s. And that was another reason why they were able to grow, because it became a true family enterprise at that point. My dad, let's say in the early 90s, late 80s, with me and my brother being younger, he was doing it alone. But at some point he needed some eyes he could trust, and me and my brother were older, and my mom joined him. And so by the time 2000 came along, they inaugurated the facility, and that's really when it became more of an institute. Now, the interesting thing about calling it an institute, Monique, is that it still took a very long time for the vision to become real. So like when I got to Codet in 2015, it was still a little bit fragmented. Like we had physicians, but the cohesion of the institute wasn't what my dad really wanted it to be. So I joke around a little bit. I kind of arrived to Chayet Vision Center in 2015, and really the last 10 years we've consolidated it into Codet Vision Institute. And the Chayet Vision Center is it wasn't called that, but we really took it to the next level the last 10 years. And I'm happy to get into that as well a little later.
Daniel, no, this is great. Thank you. I would assume that your skills are much more on the management side than on the physician side or the doctor side, but obviously you know a lot about the medicine side, the eye care side of things. But, I guess the question is, somebody who works very closely with medical professionals, what management philosophy do you find works best to maintain strong collaborative relationships with your medical team?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about teamwork. It's a collaborative process. It's a process about listening to each other. In Mexico, a lot of physicians like to run their solo practices. It's very common. This kind of institute model is a little bit less common. So, I mean, frankly, it needs to be a win-win for both sides. It needs to be a win-win in terms of they need to be able to practice the quality of care they want to practice. We need to take off, to remove the administrative burden from them. And we need to shoulder that burden ourselves. And then, ultimately, they have to see the fruits of their labor. They really have to be able to grow themselves professionally, personally, their families, economically. And so we've really created a model where it's a win-win, where they're motivated, they come into work every day, working hard, producing, and at the same time, the platform, Codet Vision Institute, I kind of say we want to be like a Four Seasons for these physicians, where they get everything from us, and they really just practice their craft. And so we have a strong call center. We have a strong clinical research department. We have a strong health insurance administrative department, because the whole health insurance process for Mexican insurance is very specific. We have a very strong customer service department, et cetera. So we have all these like shared services that we provide internally. And so really ultimately, I think the physicians, including my dad for that matter, are now kind of being able to focus more on what they love, their passion, medicine, and also not just the day-to-day care of patients, but also pushing forward clinical research, publishing new papers. They have their fellows. Codet's fellowship grew a lot. In the mid 90s, it started as one fellow, and then when I got there, it must have been four fellows or five fellows, but now we're about 14, 15 fellows in Codet across all the subspecialties. So, and that's another major value added. If you have your solo practice, you don't have the infrastructure that Codet has in order to be able to have a fellowship, for example. And the fellows provide so much. They help out, run the foundation. They help in the private practice. You come in and the optometrist performs the initial tests, then the fellow sees you very quickly, and then the actual head of the service sees you. And so it's kind of like a academic university model. Like, let's say if you were seen in UCSD or UCLA, but with that, like but the same efficiency you see in a privately run organization. Oftentimes universities can also be a little bit, let's say, bureaucratic, and I'm not trying to say anything too negative there, but we really have both sides of the coin, the very academic research focused side, and then also the like efficiency of running a privately managed enterprise.
That's super interesting, Daniel. And
Yeah.
I love how you talk about like the story of entrepreneurship. And now you are the CEO. Wow. You're a very young CEO. Tell
Yes.
us, how did you build on that legacy to keep Codet at the forefront of ophthalmology?
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. A lot of people, when I first joined, were asking me, "Hey, are you doing a lot of changes? I mean, you guys already have a good thing going on there." And you know, again, from the outside perspective, Colette has always been strong. There's no question about it. Internally, there was always opportunities to improve, always opportunities to grow. And so, one of the things, first, I didn't want to change the essence. The essence that my parents instilled. It's the quality of care, the also the warmth that like you feel when you go there, both the way the staff treats you, but also even internally, like in terms of our work environment, our work culture, like a very kind of it's a very hard thing to replicate. And so I was very cautious of not interrupting any of those types of strongly established traditions, let's say. And so, but at the same time, it's interesting. My dad, being the perfectionist that he is, had always had a vision for more. And so you have to, in order to improve things, oftentimes, you run the risk of certain people not agreeing, and you run the risk of having to, you want to generate as much consensus as you can, but at the end of the day, you're also trying to take the company to another level, and you can't, rest on your laurels, and you can't settle for, a 7 when you can become a 9. And it's interesting. One way I describe Codet is, my dad was always kind of up here, and I'm not so sure that others were at his level until I pushed the envelope, and I got there, and I brought everything kind of, from the physicians that we brought in from Mexico City and other parts of Mexico, to the staff. I have staff from all over Mexico working for us now, to the facilities, the equipment. We had good lasers. But for example, we had I'll give you a perfect example. It's interesting. The femtosecond laser for LASIK that we had before I got there was good, but the company that supplied us with that laser, all the time, we would have certain little issues, and they weren't able to fix it as fast as they could. And so we ended up partnering with a Swiss company that had a very strong distributor in Mexico. In 10 years, ever since we have that laser, we've had literally one issue right at the beginning and no other issues ever since. For example, all their like software updates it's just like, let's say like a car or like a computer. It's all through like software. It's all online. So they don't even have to come to your facility and like update it physically. So yeah, so I mean, the original question was, young CEO coming in, how do you leave a legacy? How do you kind of take it to the next level? And really, it's all about, you inherited something strong. You want to keep the essence, but slowly but surely you start having small wins. And then eventually you get enough momentum where like all of a sudden you can really start to implement bigger improvements.
Daniel, you just mentioned something about, next level. So let's get into that. We understand, we've established that your dad's experience or expertise has been foundational to Codet. But looking ahead in the future, what are your plans for this growth and the continued impact in the region?
Absolutely. I'm going to say it quickly in Spanish, and then and I'm a much better English speaker, pero tenemos mucha suerte de ser acompañados por grandísimos doctores. We're super lucky that we're not that part of our medical staff. We have many great physicians that are young, are pretty young. They're in their late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s. And so, my dad, between him and I, we're trying to set the roadmap and set the stage for the next 20, 30 years of Codet.
Sure.
I mean, he's still young. He finally ran the Boston Marathon. Yeah, he had originally tried to run it in 2020, but with COVID, it got interrupted. So he's now done the 6 majors, the 6
Wow.
and he's running more than ever. And so, his goal is to practice at Codet at least another 10, 12 years. Obviously,
Right.
assuming that, he can deliver the same quality of care that he's been delivering the last 30, 40 years. But of course, we have other physicians, Dr. Eric Navas, Dr. Sergio Groman, Doctora Gabriela Avila, Dr. Martin Guzman, Doctora Adriana Valdez, Doctora Andrea Montero, a lot of physicians who are up and coming. Some of them were trained at Codet. Some of them had amazing training in other parts of Mexico and even actually in the US, in Denver, Colorado, for example. And so it's funny, we just did a little bit of like a symposium for the health insurance community in Tijuana, like health insurance brokers and health insurance agents. And I was so proud of the way our three presenters spoke, Dr. Navas, Dr. Groman, Dr. Guzman. I learned so much, even though I know so much about their practices, but just being there as as someone in the audience, I learned so much. And so I think the future is very bright for us, honestly. Anytime you have such a big, and I'm not going to say personality, but a big figure, like my dad in Tijuana, it's you're never going to replace someone, apple for apple, right? Like they say in soccer, hombre por hombre, or mujer por mujer. But I
Right.
think that all these physicians collectively,
Yes.
and with strong management, with strong processes, can do a good job. Not to say that we'll ever be anything even remotely close to something like Apple, but you see it in Apple. Steve Jobs wasn't replaced. You have a good CEO in Tim Cook, but really it's the departments and the leaders, and then the processes that were already there.
Right.
And that has allowed Apple really to thrive ever since Steve Jobs passed 15 years ago.
Yeah. So we for listeners that are considering medical care across the border, what advice would you give to someone thinking about coming to Codet? How can they best prepare for their experience, and what support can they expect from your team?
That's a great question. So, I mean, for us specifically, we have a whole process for addressing all medical tourists, all of their concerns before they travel, addressing anything from the care itself to the city, to the logistics, to the pre-op, to the post-op, all that. So we have a very specific process. What I suggest for people interested in Codet is to reach out to us. You can reach out to us in any single way you want, whether it's a phone call, an email, you go online, you fill out a web form, get in touch with us through WhatsApp, whatever's convenient for you. That's one thing that we've really wanted to do. For certain people, they love texting. Certain people, they love calling. Certain people, they prefer email. We're even doing a lot of virtual conversations. If it's, for example, for eyelid surgery, which is more cosmetic, we do virtual evaluations. If it's for something like vision based, then you have to come in, because I mean, we do so many tests that we can't really do those remotely. And we even provide transportation. So if you're flying in from other parts of the country, or if you're taking a train down, or if you're staying with a family member in San Diego, but you don't want to cross the border yourself, we'll pick you up in San Diego. So just start the conversation with us. And then in general, to kind of anyone who's considering medical tourism, I think it's important to go through the hospital or the clinic's reviews online. I think that's important to really understand, what other people are saying. It's important maybe to hear a testimonial or two. It's important to maybe even see if you can talk to another patient that has had the procedure. But those kinds of references, I think, have a lot of value and allow you to understand, what the experience might be like.
Daniel, we get into this question every time it's actually two questions when we try to finish our podcast. And when you hear the words border master, what comes to mind?
What comes to mind is like a little bit like, what's the name of that, the series where you learn, you become like an expert in something?
Like
Masterclass.
Masterclass. Yeah, masterclass. So I guess what comes to mind is like something along the lines of that you guys are bringing together some of the top kind of leaders in the region to tell their stories and to share with the world that the border is much more than maybe what the media says it is, and that there's a lot of expertise on both sides of the border, and so that's kind of more or less what comes.
And Daniel, do you consider yourself a border master?
I'm gonna let Monique and Gustavo I'm gonna let you guys decide that, or maybe even the audience. Hopefully, we get a few people to listen to this story, but I'm just happy to. I feel very privileged to be a part of the San Diego Tijuana community, and it's something that I don't know if I speak for everybody, but growing up in San Diego, being a Mexican American, I was born in Mexico City. You grow up and you don't always realize what you have until you kind of get a little older, get a little wiser. You travel to other parts of the world. You hear stories of what's happening in California, or you hear stories of what's happening in Mexico City, and you say, you know what, the combination here is interesting. It's actually pretty cool. The last 10 years have been amazing for me. I've grown so much, and more than considering myself a border master, to answer your question, I think Codet is a border master. I think Codet is something that I'm very lucky to be a part of, and I hope that we can just impact that many more lives over the next 5 to 10 years.
But you know what? I agree with you. Codet is the border master, but at the same time, who's been behind it? Your dad, certainly, yourself, and a number of doctors that you mentioned here. That you all of you come together and make this a mastery, right? This is in eye care, of course. But before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners? How can they connect with Codet Vision Institute?
The easiest way to connect is just Google us, Codet Vision, or go online, codetvision.com, or even nowadays with ChatGPT and all the other LLMs, just look us up, Codet Vision, or any one of our physicians, and we're there to help you guys out. It's every time a new patient reaches out to us, it's a new opportunity to make an impact. So we're excited.
Yeah, and Codet, remember everyone, is CODET. And I love, Daniel, that you have the Tijuana as the second company we interviewed that has a Tijuana name on it. So I love it. Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing your story and all your insights today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for reaching out and wanting to hear our story. And I wish Border Masters the best of luck. I'm gonna make sure a lot of my friends and family know about the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you to our listeners for tuning into Border Masters. You can find us on olasmedia.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcast. If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, reach us at info@bordermasterspodcast.com. So I'm Gustavo de la Fuente.
And I'm Monica Sellas. Thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you. I'm Daniel Chayet from Codet Vision Institute, and you're listening to Border Masters.
Monique, what a show. I cannot believe the type of pioneering eye care that this company has done over so many years. And plus, we were all three in different locations as we did this. I think he was in Tijuana, you were in your home, and I was in my home in San Diego. So thanks to technology that we're doing this, but amazing show.
Yeah, I also like that Daniel is a very young, up-and-coming CEO. He's just 40. And I think that I love the story of family thriving business. And as a daughter of entrepreneurs myself, I think how lucky he is that he can, even though he's doing something very different from his dad, that he's able to come in and grow the family company. So I think this was also a lesson of how do you as a family, and how, even like he said, on the exterior, we see Codet as this like very strong, thriving institute. But if you hear the story, it comes like from many, many years, his grandfather, his father,
yes.
And Tijuana once again as a land of opportunity, right?
It's a huge legacy that he has from his grandfather passed down, but he also has this great challenge, right? He needs to do the day-to-day, run this operation, do it really well, run the institute, run the fellowships that they do. It's a tremendous amount of work that he's done. He's done really well with it. He's grown it, and as I said, at some point his dad's going to retire. And so the name has to live on, and working with young doctors, as he was mentioning, is huge. That's really the institutional part of it. You have to have young doctors continue, with eye care, of course, in different specialties that they have now, and even improve on those specialties and thrive. So yeah. I'm very, very, glad to kind of listen to a story like that. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, and I also like another piece aligned to what we are all about here at Border Masters, pioneers near the border. When we were talking about who were the first people who did the LASIK surgery, and it was the first one was in Canada, actually Ontario, so pioneer near the border. Right. And then the second one was his dad, Dr. Arturo Chayet, in the border here in Tijuana. So I love, again, how we see once again how these regions bring pioneers and opportunity.
Yes. No, for sure. So we really thank Daniel for doing this. It's amazing work that he's done.
This episode of Border Masters fue creado por un Dream Team. JC Polk, nuestro production consultant that supports us con su experiencia y creatividad. Lina Álvarez, nuestra executive producer, siempre al mando. Ulises Bretón, nuestro creative director, bringing the vision to life. Alan González, el audio engineer, que nos hace sonar increíble. Y un agradecimiento especial a Chad Peace, founder y presidente, por ser la inspiración detrás de todo esto. Producido entre la sunny San Diego, California y la vibrant Tijuana, Baja California, Olas Media es parte de IBC Media Group. ¿Quieres más? Check out olasmedia.com para más episodios y el blog del show. Gracias por escucharnos. De parte de Gustavo y Monique, nos vemos la próxima vez.